My role here at the Australian Wine Research Institute is a senior scientist, and I work in the sensory science space, or along with flavor chemistry, to understand the different chemical compounds and composition of wines and how we respond and experience them. At first I started out in winemaking. Actually, before that I was really interested in wine, just working in hotels and serving wine and selling wines. And then went back to school and did a viticulture and enology degree in Canada, so at Brock University. Ended up here in Australia, and then through UC Davis did a consumer and sensory science post-grad program. And then now at Deakin University doing a PhD, more looking at how chemical composition relates to our senses, so sensory science being study of our senses. So when we have different compounds, taste compounds that are in the wine, and how that changes our experience of the wine and how we might like or dislike certain wine styles. The nice floral, almost raspberry or violet aroma that's very strong, and only about maybe 50% of the population can smell it and other people cannot smell it, so due to your genetics. You know, if you're interested in food and if you're interested in your senses, it is, I find, sort of a theme, especially in sciences, to think that we're always studying sort of like chemistry or hard things, and it's very theoretical, almost abstract in some way. I remember in university in organic chemistry, it seemed very abstract. I didn't see it as very practical. But here, that really does have practical applications, that those structures and the compounds actually have real meaning, and you can taste it. You can taste, you know, differences in concentrations of certain compounds. So I think, you know, you have a bit of a science mind, but you also like food and like the experience of eating and drinking and smelling things and those kind of things, and that intersection I find very interesting. The big thing would just be to pay attention to your senses. I think you don't experience the world directly, right? We're always stuck within our senses. You're looking through your eyes, you're smelling things in the external world, but just paying attention to how you experience all these different things, and particularly getting interested in food. I think that's cooking. That's a very good skill to have, regardless of where your career goes, is learning how to cook. But it's possible to be passionate about that and investigate it in an objective way through science, and actually provide really meaningful solutions to industries or to food industries like the wine industry. We're an interesting department within the Research Institute in the sense that we have a connection to almost every other department, because let's say the yeast researchers want to do some trials with their new yeast. They make some wines. They need to measure all the chemical compounds in there, but they also need to understand what's changing. Why does it matter? Why should they try to have one yeast or tell a winemaker to use one versus another to achieve a certain flavor? So generally we would start any kind of projects. We would bench taste wines, so maybe they would have a set of samples that they made from their different yeasts, for example. And so we would gather a group of people, experts type tasters, and we would just sort of talk about the differences and taste through them, and then decide on what type of a sensory test we would do. So what's the objective of the researcher? So behind me you can see all the glasses, so we're going to conduct a big study, so we have to label everything so people don't know what they're tasting. So you try to remove or control as much of the bias as you can, so that we have objective measures of a subjective experience. And then a lot of my job is statistics, which might sound really boring to most people, but we use statistics to tell us where there's some anomaly that is interesting and we should go and chase it. And so I spend a lot of time looking at chemical data and relating it to sensory data, so what the people experienced, and then also to consumer data. And so we use statistics to link those three things together. And then the statistics can allow you to say how much evidence there is for, let's say, the most liked wine to have these sorts of flavors and which compounds were driving those flavors. These are the type of techniques basically that big food companies use to optimize food products. We're just using it for an exploratory purpose rather than generally optimization. So I think the three words I'd use to describe the wine industry would be fun, and you have lots of ability to travel if you want, but also that curiosity. And I think that curiosity is scientific inquiry, or even just self-inquiry.